take one of you as well?
Yeah, of course, yeah, definitely. Paul Lennon is my name. We'll publish all the photos. Smile, guys! Smile! Glenn, could you tell us what is the main reason you are in the Criminal Court of Justice? Do you have a day today?
Yeah, the DPP has brought charges against me. The charge is that I did organise or what's the wording of it? Did organise or cause to be organised an event. It's the first charge of several charges. So yeah.
Okay. How it's happened in Ireland that peaceful assembly, peaceful protests become illegal and a crime?
Well, obviously the government introduced various draconian measures during the COVID crisis, and one of those measures was to curb the spread of the virus, and they're using that particular law to go after people who supposedly or allegedly organised protests, which is not an event, but nonetheless it's obviously to curb people's human right laid down in the Irish Constitution to peacefully and lawfully assemble.
What crime of the year Director of Public Prosecution incriminates you?
Sorry, say that again?
What crime of the year Director of Public Prosecution incriminates you?
I don't understand the question.
Like crime of the year, what's they accusing you against you?
Well, yeah, they're accusing me of organising or the alleged crime is that I organised or led to be organised an event, which I didn't. I exercised my constitutional right to protest and to peacefully and lawfully assemble, so that'll be the argument in court today.
Okay. Is anyone else from 10,000 people at peaceful protests was charged with the offence, or just you?
Yeah, it's just me. There's been like dozens of protests throughout the last 2 years, from the Debenhams workers to the Black Lives Matter protests to various other protests, and as far as I'm aware, no charges are being brought against any of the political parties. I kind of feel it's a bit political policing, and it's to dissuade people going forward to exercise their constitutional right to peacefully assemble. So yeah.
Do you think on what criteria they establish those criminals? Why was only you blamed for all the crimes in the streets that day?
I don't know. It's not a crime. To exercise your constitutional right is not a crime. And I would highly recommend everybody exercises their constitutional right to peacefully assemble. It's certainly not a crime, so to suggest that it's a crime is just wrong. And as I said, I recommend highly that everybody, especially if you have a grievance with the government or you have a grievance in a particular issue, it's everybody's right. It doesn't matter what your political persuasion is. You have a constitutional right protected in the Irish Constitution. It's your human right to peacefully assemble.
Judges have bad practice constantly adjourned court cases. They try to slowly torture and scare people. Do you think is that going to happen to you?
Yes, yeah. The DPP is holding separate cases for the same charges on different dates going forward. So, yeah.
Do you think this is used like torture techniques and intimidation?
Well, yeah, I think it's kind of just dissuade other people from exercising their constitutional right. Like if they're successful in this particular instance, like it's not really about me anymore. It's about people exercising their constitutional right. So if people see that that's going to be maybe dragged through the courts for weeks and weeks and months, obviously then that's going to be it's not going to be very encouraging for anybody going forward. So as I said, like, it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is or where you decide whether you're left or whether you're right or whatever all that nonsense is. But the reality is that if the government is successful, the DPP is successful in this particular case, this is political policing. So if the government is successful in this prosecution, Well, that's going to dissuade other people in the future protesting against very, very important issues like homelessness, the housing crisis, better health care, better pay, etc., etc., etc. So, it's not going to be good for democracy going forward.
But we're not afraid. Is it? We have faith over the fear.
No, absolutely, yeah. Like as I said, it doesn't cost anything to exercise your constitutional rights. Well, it does, but if you're going to have a belief and you're going to stand up for your rights and have the courage of your convictions, then yeah, you have to defend human rights and you have to defend your constitutional rights. Otherwise, what do we have? We just have a dictatorship of a government, no different than China or despots, etc., etc. And the way the world is going at the moment, it is vital that people stand up for their rights. And it does, as I said, it doesn't cost anything. And each individual has to take personal responsibility for their rights, and collectively together, then we can push back with a legitimate, legitimate collective to protect human rights and their constitutional rights.
Do you think people in Ireland gave their rights away silently? People not standing for their rights as wolves, and seems to become weak as a sheep?
Well, you never call anybody a sheep for starters. Fear is highly motivated. When people are afraid of something, especially something that they don't really know about, we've had 2 years of the press in Ireland pushing an agenda, a government agenda, paid to push a government agenda and scaremonger the entire population, and that fear has led an awful lot of people to just to accept it, just to get along, but they've taken away and they've infringed on so many human rights: the right to work, the right to travel, the freedom of movement, etc., etc. The right to peacefully assemble, and there's a lot more as well. The right to freedom of religion, so like all of these things have been infringed on, and of course there is a fine line between balancing for the greater good, or in the government, as the government suggests, for the health of the nation. But when the data is now starting to come out now that it was a bit overzealous,
How important for ordinary citizens like farmers, truck drivers, nurses stand and fight for their rights, for protest?
It's vital that every single person in this country, on this island, demonstrates and exercises their right when they deem necessary, just like any of the groups that might go out there to protest and campaign for better paying conditions, for better, whatever the issue is. So if we lose that particular right, then we're stuffed. Other things can be brought in to infringe more and more and more. It's chipping away. So there has to be some sort of opposition. Clearly, there's no opposition in government. We have Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and then the rest of them are the fake opposition. There are a couple of really, really good independents there, but they're just outnumbered. And unfortunately, that's just the situation. There is no alternative. There is no pushback. There is no opposition to the Golden Circle Green Jersey Brigade.
Why you was only charged one from 10,000 people on because you're greatest, smartest, prettiest person? What criteria they choose? Like,
I don't know. Maybe it's the beard. I don't know. I can't answer that question.
Okay. Do you think people in Ireland need to learn themselves how to stand for their constitutional rights, lodge letters to the TDs in person, on camera, write letters, lodge cases against injustice?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's 1,000 ways you can protest. There's a peacefully protest, I might add, peacefully and legally. So you know, write letters, send emails, you know, protest outside their offices, protest outside government buildings, civic buildings, you know, protest on the street, hang banners, you know, there's 1,000 ways to peacefully protest, and as long as it's not putting anybody in danger and the health and safety of people is respected. That's a lot of people would some people will disagree with that, and unfortunately that's a slippery slope, and you know, I don't want to see any of my countrymen or country ladies you know, get hurt or injured or lose their lives. Yes, it is important to fight for our rights and stuff, but not at the expense of someone's life.
Okay. Do you think government implement new habits to our society that are people afraid to speak the truth when they seek justice?
Yeah, that's a complex question. There's a lot of criticism, especially on social media, and a lot of people would say, "Oh, I can do it better, and I can do this, and I can do that, and you know, you're doing it wrong."
Sofa critics.
Yeah, there's a lot of, yeah. Well, you know, some people call them keyboard warriors, etc., and all that. But here's the thing. See, the problem is a lot of people are listening to other people's opinions, and then they're trying to form their own opinions. And sometimes those opinions are based on lies or innuendo or just pure rumor, and not on fact. So I would always recommend people, you know, to get into it, study it a little bit, watch for the rabbit holes, obviously, because you can go down some rabbit holes and get into some things that are just not constructive, they're not helpful. And I would always say to people, you know, especially the critics, is, you know, maybe instead of criticizing, sit down in front of a mirror and ask yourself, are you helping? And if the answer is no, you're not helping, criticize yourself for a change. If you're not helping, if it's not improving the conditions that we're living in, if it's not improving the growth of any movement who's trying to fight back against us, you know, for better conditions, then you're doing something wrong, and you need to reevaluate what you're doing and then come at it from a different approach. Because if it's not working, then you got to change it, you know?
Basically, it's easy to criticize someone and do nothing himself.
Yeah, it's easy. Look, criticism is criticism, opinions are opinions, they change nothing. The only way we're going to change things is if we collectively come together and we get out onto the streets collectively, you know, and push back and create the opposition that is desperately needed in this country.
I hope obviously you not admit guilt. How far are you ready to go to find justice? Are you planning to apply to appeal the decision to High Court, seek judicial review, European Court of Justice?
Well, you know, first things first, we're going to go through the case here today. Obviously, I'm pleading not guilty because I'm not guilty. The only thing I'm guilty of is exercising my constitutional right to peacefully assemble. So we'll see where things go from there, and you know.
But you ready to go to all the protests to show people that you strength and faith?
If they want to lock me up, they're going to lock me up. That's what they've decided, and they probably decided long before I turned up here today. So at the end of the day, you know, I'll go full hog, you know.
So what do you like to deliver to people, like if you to other people, followers who follow you or who like loves what you're doing?
Yeah, well, as I've always said, I've said from day one, the onus is on you, the individual. The onus is on every single individual who wants to exercise their constitutional rights. One of your constitutional rights is your responsibility to the country, right? So if you feel that there's something wrong, then it's your right as a citizen, as a person who lives on this island, to push back. And that starts with you, the individual. So that's it. Just take that encouragement that it starts with you. So whether you go to a protest, whether you do something yourself, whether you write letters, that's brilliant. Try and reach out to other people. You know, maybe ask other people to help you do what you're doing, and every little bit helps. So on the grand big scale of it, then if there's a lot of people doing it, that's pushback. So, and the more pushback we get, the more that encourages the people who just go along to get along. So yeah.
And would you agree, very important to be the change that, like,
absolutely, yeah. Look, this country desperately needs change. Absolutely desperately needs change. There's a lot of problems in this country, there's a lot of crises in this country that are not being addressed. Some of them are being made worse. So the reality here is that we desperately need change. there is no opposition to the current Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael Green Party government. Excuse me. And they're just going to, there's 100 years of a revolving door, the same nonsense time and time again. This fake party rivalry, it just doesn't exist. And when they want to implement something, whether it be higher taxes, new legislation and laws, a license for this, a license for that, a levy for this, a levy for that, and so on and so forth. Sugar taxes, carbon taxes, hike them all up, increase the bag of coal, drive a million people into poverty when we're one of the wealthiest nations in the world. So it doesn't make sense that they're cutting their nose off to spite their face, and it's always ordinary Joes and Janes in the streets who pay the ultimate price, and that's higher taxes and lower standard of service. So you have to take the responsibility yourself. John F. Kennedy once famously said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And as a great Irishman, a descendant from Irish men, he wasn't telling you lies. So take it, use it, and get out there and do something. You don't have to say you follow this person or follow that person. You don't need any of that. Form your own opinions, educate yourself, push back, and it's about getting out there.
And do you think, I know that government use divide and conquer techniques all the time between people, different groups, to split them and make small groups? What do you think?
Yeah, I suppose the government does that a lot, and there are various different groups that use that tactic as well. Various political parties do the same thing, and then there are some people who are who are trying to do good, but just going about it the wrong way, and they cause their own divisions and stuff. And as I said earlier on, you call them the critics, call them the
Suffer critics.
I don't want to be disparaging. It's good to criticise, and it's good to be criticised. But if it's not helpful, if it's not helping the movement grow, then you really have to ask yourself what you're doing wrong. If you're not helping, then is there a different process where you could help instead?